like you just ask questions as we go through this. I mean, you won't shake us.
Yeah.
You won't shake me anyway.
No, we'll be just fine. So we'll get going. By way of introduction, I'm Robb Lifferth. I'm the co-founder of IsoTalent. I'm here with my very good friend Steve Smith.
Hey, I'm Steve. Obviously, some of you might know me. I'm from ApplicantPro. I'm the chief hiring expert there. I've been there for almost 15 years. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm excited though. So it's fun. I've done these a lot, but I've never actually done one with somebody. Like,
is that right?
Literally side by side. This is my first time ever. Yes. So it's actually kind of cool. I'm excited about this.
Okay, this will be great. So we want to walk you through our thought process. So between the two of us, we have hired thousands upon thousands.
Tens of thousands?
Yeah.
I would go into the tens.
Yeah, it is a lot of people. And so there are things that and we're going into the hiring season, right? Statistically speaking, the end September and October are huge hiring months. Oftentimes they can be, depending on the year, they're either the biggest hiring month or the second biggest hiring month time period of the year. And so there are some things that we wanted to share as we keep getting asked the same questions. And a lot of it has to do with hiring managers in particular. My background being in HR is that there's a lot of trainings that get put out in the world, but there's very few trainings that are geared specifically towards hiring managers and how they can be more effective. So that's what we're going to focus on today.
They don't get as much attention. I don't know why. And then we complain sometimes about what they give us, right? As recruiters. Why?
Yeah, that's exactly.
We got to be better at educating. And so one of the goals here is to help us understand some of the elements that exist in order to educate our hiring managers more effectively, to actually make them successful in making us successful.
That's exactly.
And vice versa. So
yeah, it's one of those things that we talked through when we were putting this together, is that we can do everything right. You can have an excellent applicant tracking system. You can have an excellent recruiter. You can have all the things done right. And if the hiring manager hasn't engaged it the proper way, it's the linchpin. Everything will fall apart.
Yeah, completely. And not only does it fall apart, but you get a lot of angst there and a lot, what I call it, a choke point. So I don't know when I was a recruiter, I used to come up against the hiring manager all the time. And then they would hate me. I would hate them for a day. We'd finally get over it. And then we'd come back and make amends and all that. But it was just those tiny choke points like that. They just wasted time.
Yep.
And there was no need for it if we had all been on the same page to begin with. And so just a huge part of this. So
yeah. So there are a couple. So we want to start with, we have several things we want to go through. I'm going to take some of the talking points. Steve will take some of the talking points. And we'll go from there. The first thing we want to talk about is understanding the timeline. The timeline is so important to understand, because once you understand that, you come back into the time when you need to start the process. You come back into the time, like understand your personal time commitment, depending on how much you're going to, what your support staff is, that sort of thing. And so let's start. I want to start with just a simple timeline. If you were to say, I want someone to start October 1, that's the day that I want them to start the job. If you back into the timeline, it's about 57 days. So that means you need to start the recruiting process basically August 2nd.
Easily.
Yeah. And it might be earlier than that. There's a couple things that you can kind of fudge, to speed things up. Yep. But that's pretty average. And it's a lot longer than what people expect. People get tripped up is their internal process, getting it through their internal budgeting process, through their CFO or the finance group, their CEO, whatever it may be.
That's before it even hits HR.
Yeah, it hasn't even
got
been
to HR yet.
It hasn't been posted.
Yeah.
And then the second one that people get hung up on is that the posting and the actual finding, we call it sourcing in the industry, sourcing candidates, but that's the act of finding the candidates. That is the longest pole in the tent, right? And IsoTalent has a very unique perspective on this. We have an hourly model, and so we spent just months and months and months breaking this down, so we understand this intimately on each part. And so we've gone through this process for several years now. We check it about every 6 weeks, so we know what it is. And that sourcing part takes the longest amount. It's about 10 days. That's the average time to get a good candidate pool. It's 10, sometimes 15 days if it's a harder role, or more senior role.
Let me ask you a question
It
here.
could be much longer.
Yeah,
actually.
let me ask you a question here. When you say 10 days, because I get this question a lot from other clients I speak with. When you say 10 days on average, is that just business days?
Always business days.
Yeah.
I will always
And
business days.
so I just wanted to bring that up because
2
I know
weeks.
that's a question that oftentimes comes up. So when you think about it in a business perspective, you are really realistically looking at a 2-week window.
Yep,
in essence.
That's
so
exactly.
So I just wanted to bring that up because that's something comes up a lot.
Yeah, and sometimes you get lucky and you find a candidate early on, but a lot of times you don't.
That's where it's at.
And then the recruiting process can take 7 to 21 days depending on how fast your company can get through it. Negotiation, I just went through one. It was this VP role. Negotiated this VP out, and it took 5 business days. And that was super average, right? And then depending on whether working, how fast your IT works, all the logistics,
the background stuff.
But that averages on 14 days. So like I said, now all of a sudden you're at 57. You're at 57 calendar days all the way in. So you really should be starting. If you want them to start October 1, you're back in August.
Yeah.
The other thing is also understanding the commitment to the hiring manager.
Oh, so such an important piece.
Steve, walk me through. Why is this so important to you? Like, you have this document that I thought is so interesting. Walk me through, why is it so important that the hiring manager gets this?
Yeah. See, one of the biggest choke points as well, and it's also a disconnect with communication, is the hiring manager doesn't always understand this time. Like sometimes in HR, we understand the timeline. We talk about it all the time, or we have something kind of listed out that we know what it's going to look like. But we don't really educate our hiring managers on, hey, here's the timeline. Here's how, and we're not reminding them, because sometimes our hiring managers, they don't hire but once a year or once every other year, right? Some of them, they have positions that are filled, and so there's just nothing going on. And all of a sudden they need something. They're in a frantic panic, and they just think, okay, here's the job description. Thank you, HR. Good luck. And there's been no element of commitment on their part. There's been no element of understanding the timeline and actually understanding that this is what the process actually looks like. And so from A to B, this is where we want to be. And so ultimately, you have to become a partner with your hiring manager.
Absolutely.
And this may sound weird, like in a corporate setting, right? I was a corporate recruiter for years before I started with ApplicantPro, but I literally would have my managers sign a document. They would sign an agreement with me as the recruiter. And in that agreement, it outlined the timeline, very similar to what you see on the screen here today, is a timeline of this is what our expectations are. This is what we think it's going to take. And because of that, we want you as a manager to understand that this is the process. And once we get to that interview phase, this is the time you have.
So I love,
we're going to get into this a little bit more, but
I love this. One of the things to understand about this, in particular, 2017 was a magic year, right? No one understands why it was a magic year. There was this magical point in time in 2017 when the number of candidates that were available in the United States and the number of jobs went like this. So all of a sudden, there are way more jobs available than candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So before, the companies would, they could get away with treating candidates poorly, right? Because it's like, there's more candidates than jobs, and so whatever.
They were pickier.
Yeah,
they could be pickier.
They could be pickier.
Yeah.
And those days are gone, and I'll tell you right now, and we don't need to get into the statistics behind it. Those days are gone, and they will actually never come back.
They won't.
Like not in my we didn't have enough babies. Like I can get into all the math behind it. Like it literally is, that's what it's pointing to. My parents retired, my dad retired, that generation retired. And so you just don't have enough workers in the workplace. And so you have to be faster. You have to treat them better. You have to worry about, candidate experience, because, and brand management, because it will reflect poorly on you. And so it's important for you to understand. Here is the number one statistic for you guys to understand as you go through today. Candidates are, the average time that a candidate, if you go across all verticals, the average time that a candidate is on the market, 18 days.
Yeah.
18 to 21 days.
Yeah.
So that means,
think about that.
It's crazy fast.
Yeah.
So your process has to move people through quickly and efficiently. and in such a way that they are excited to work for you. You got to sell the sizzle.
Yeah.
That's something that's new. So let's talk a couple of things moving on from that. I want to talk about budgets. And I talk about budgets in two ways. I want to talk a little bit about cash budget, right? But I'm going to actually start with the pro tip first. Before you think that you're going to launch like a job, right, for your role in your department, make sure you understand your internal approval process.
Amen.
Before you start, right? And this is like having managed internal recruiting groups and having managed an external recruiting group. This is like the greatest, false starter on the planet. Is like, yeah, I get a phone call, hey, we're ready to go. Let's get going. It's August 1. I got to start October 1. Let's get going. We start recruiting, and the CFO is like, oh, heck no. We haven't
Wait a minute.
We haven't gone through this, right? And then, most of the time it ends up getting approved anyway. But make sure you understand that before you go.
Yeah.
I have seen, when I was head of HR, I've seen people get not promoted for this, right? Because they weren't in good internal corporate partners. And I've seen 2 people get fired over this because they kept doing this over and over and over, and it cost the company a lot of money and reputation. And so make sure you just understand that.
Honestly, it's like teaching my daughter how to drive. You know how when they first get going and they're like braking constantly, like they get crazy, right? They sit here and brake, and after a while you just get dizzy and sick, and you're just like, all right, sweetheart. Like I'm like literally bracing myself in the vehicle, and I'm like, okay, you don't have to brake so much. Let's talk about this first. Let's practice with the pedals before we even start moving, instead of all these little false jerky starts. And honestly, I feel like that's what it's like.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really what it's like in that process.
That's true.
And that's only fresh on my mind because obviously recently my daughter just got her license.
Bless the child. Okay, so let's talk about cash compensation. Cash compensation, between our 2 companies, we have, and we do this, and we re-update it all the time. We have interviewed and we've done surveys of literally millions of candidates.
Oh, easily.
And the number one thing they look at any job posting is cash compensation. So rule number 1 on cash compensation: post it. And I get it from an HR. Like, I'm gonna put my old HR hat on, right, and say, hey, look, I can understand all the reasons why you don't want to, and someone might see how much they make. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It is rule number 1. Your job will perform so much better on job boards and if you have it posted. And
you
frankly,
want the statistic?
I do.
It's 30 to 50% better, depending on the role. It is, you're right off the bat, just the pay alone, you will increase your applicant flow by 30 to 50%. Right off the bat. That statistic has been true for the past several years. We track it all the time. So
here's my favorite thing. The job boards right now are putting in their estimates anyway.
They are.
So if you want it to be right, better post it.
Because otherwise you get a lot of crap too. You get disqualified applicants or disgruntled because they see a number. They think, oh, this is what I'm going to get paid. They apply. They're all excited. And all of a sudden they get to the interview and it's like, oh, wait a minute. That was just an Indeed's guesstimate or whoever's guesstimate out there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I cannot emphasize this enough. I really can't.
Yeah, post it. And then 2, the thing, as you're coming up with a compensation range, come up with a reasonable compensation range. Don't put like, a $90,000 swath between the minimum.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, it won't work. And understand, the internal wage compressions. I get that, especially where there's been a lot of wage increase over the last couple of years. You need to understand your internal markets, right? And your external markets are out there, and and make sure the comparison's right.
Yeah.
And then the third rule is like rule number 1. Post
right back to it.
No, seriously.
Make it visible. Transparency.
Yeah.
There is a reason why transparency is one of the most popular terms in HR. Right?
It is.
Period.
It will make your company look like they really have their act together. So make sure you post it.
So you just said something that is so critical because in our interviews with applicants, so as I was preparing my book and things like that, I was doing a lot of research on this. And did you know that 9 out of 10 applicants, when you don't include the pay, over 70% of that group thinks that you're trying to hide something.
Oh, that's fast.
So they already have this mentality that you're hiding something from them. And when you hide something from somebody, what does that mean? That means you might be lying. You might be trying to trick them. And so think about that for a moment. Think about that.
That's fascinating.
Right. So literally from the get-go, from the job ad itself, you are already at a stage where you might be scaring off potential applicants simply because you didn't include.
And there's no malicious intent. A lot of people, they just didn't do it.
Not at all. We just don't do it. It's one of those habits. Or sometimes I talk to nonprofits. I talk to, some industries who are like, well, we pay a whole lot less than some of our competitors. Guys, guess what? That's not a bad thing, because if you think about where search engine technology, we're going to delve into this right now with mobile technology and AI. How has that changed the process? The reality is a lot of this has already been around.
Yeah,
we've been using AI technology and mobile technology for the past 8 or 9 years. This is not new. In fact, if you think about a search engine like Indeed or Google, that's AI technology,
right?
Period, right? So it's already been around for a long time. And so you have to know that if an applicant is online and they're conducting a search and they want to filter by the pay, don't you want your position to be found?
That's right.
Right? So you have to be found. So these 4 things on the screen, I'm going to just talk very briefly about these. You have to understand that during the application process, this is the first impression that an applicant has of your company. This is the first impression, your job ad, and then the actual application process. And it amazes me that sometimes we get the job ad so good, so juicy, so exciting, but then all of a sudden the applicant gets to the application and they abandon the process. They abandon it. 76% of applicants, if they have to do a redirect, you'll see the redirect versus the quick apply on here. Quick apply is where they can just use their profile. They click a button and hails the information, sends it over to the ATS. It's done, right? Whereas a redirect, I click the button, it redirects me to the company website or the company ATS system. And then from there, they try to parse their resume, which sometimes doesn't always work, or they have to fill out the application from scratch. Nothing is in there. Sometimes they'll parse the resume and they have to start over. So it just becomes this choke point for a lot of applicants. So if your process does not allow the applicant to do a quick apply, just use their profile. And the reason profile parsing is replacing resume parsing, in the world of HR, you probably have heard, and I've seen this at conferences, that people are saying that resumes are going away. Guys, they're not going away. But this is where the disconnect comes in, or the miscommunication. Resumes are the information on a resume we will always need to make an informed decision. But what's going away is the concept of resume parsing, because profile parsing is built to be 100% accurate all the time. Yep. That's what's replacing resumes, right? Yep. And so the resume concept will always be there. The information on a resume will always be there. Resumes are not going away.
It's the process of getting
it through.
It needs to be digitized.
Absolutely.
That's what you're going to see. You're going to see resumes instead of being an analog piece of paper where you're using technology to decipher it, whatever it may be. It's digitizing it and keeping it on a digital wallet, so to speak. Right?
And that is known as profile parsing. Profile parsing is where it just inhales the profile, sends it over. It's a very quick process for the applicant. It's like dating apps, the matching game. The whole purpose of an algorithm in AI technology is to match the applicant with your job. Well, think about it. If your job is not written in a way to actually play the dating game the right way, you will never match properly. And part of those elements include pay that we've already talked about. Now, the final thing are those job screening questions. There are 2 elements to the job screening questions you need to be aware of. And this has to do with preferences. Because oftentimes when we meet with managers, and this becomes a choke point, right? Yep. We meet with our managers like, oh yeah, I have these preferences that I have in place. I really want this purple unicorn instead of the blue unicorn, right? And so they go through this process and you're like, well, okay, if that's just a preference, did you know that when you put preferences on your job ad, that you actually scare applicants away? And I don't know why this statistic is real.
So I want to back up just a little bit. So
go ahead.
So jobs will have must-haves, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Like you
That's
have
actually this next slide.
You have to have them.
You have to have
and then you have preferences, right?
Correct.
On top of that. Okay.
Correct.
So that's what we're talking about. So the preference side.
The preference side of it. So there are elements of your job ad. Now, we're not going to delve into these optimization principles. I have other webinars that we can do where we can delve in this in depth. I have a workshop we can do. So
this is ApplicantPro, for example. Does a wonderful job.
This is from this is from what we've done with our clients over the last 15 years. It's a lot of the elements from my book. And so we're not going to go into details on this, but I want to point out this qualifications versus preferences, because it's this choke point for managers where managers like, well, this is what I want. Okay, but this is the minimum. So what you need to focus on is the minimum, because in your job ad, females are actually 3 times less likely to apply when there are preferences in place. And especially if they don't meet the preferences. Now, I actually did a study on this just on Wednesday. I had a group of females. We all got together. There were, let's see, how many were there? There were almost 40.
Mhm.
And I actually did this role play with them, and I showed them different job ads, and we went through this process. And I said, okay, help me understand why you would apply for this one or why you wouldn't apply for this one. And for some reason, when you see preferences, females read that and they think, oh, I bet there's somebody else that might have that qualification. So I'm not even gonna.
The funny thing is, so I know the stat, right?
Yeah.
And then males are like, I like, they'll see a stack of preferences, and I think that the math is like, if they can do 5 of the 10,
yep, then they'll
apply. Like, I'll figure the rest out. Yep. And female are like, I need to be able to do 11 of the 10, right?
Yeah.
And so it is just the way that the mentality is, and so
yeah, and it's not to make fun of or throw under the bus. It's just that's the way they think.
But this is why writing your job ad is so important, because
critical.
We in the world of D&I, where you're trying to bring in a diverse candidate, and diverse can be divided. It can be so, for example, in my business, I am the minority, right? Compared to,
so am I.
So which
we have like 80% female in my company.
Yeah, so diversity in my company is a little bit different. But if you are wanting more females in your organization, for example, and you write it that way, you are unknowingly not attracting that group that subset of the applicants into your organization.
I mean, all of adverse impact. Yep, that's what it is. It's adverse impact. And so, that's the other reason why ad rotation and having different versions of your ad are also helpful, because you might target one group for the first 30 days, and then you can target a completely different group for the next 30 days, even though it's the same job. It's just different ads. So anyway, I cannot emphasize this enough. Your ad has all the impact on the types of applicants that come in the first place, which is why we partner with IsoTalent to help with this, so that they have the right types of ads out there promoting and bringing in the right applicants to begin with, right?
Sarah
Flagle
over at ApplicantPro is like she's probably the world-renowned expert on this. She's taught me so much about this. If you guys, there's like Steve said, there is hours to unpack here, and to get the right amount of applicant flow into your jobs. Sarah is the world-renowned expert. If you have any questions on this, reach out to Steve, reach out to myself, and we get you in contact.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. All right, so last little thing, I talked about this with the qualifications and such. So what are the preferences? Not only do you need to focus on the must-haves, the accidental purple unicorns is what I call it. I know, Rob, you told me just the purple unicorn, right? People want these purple unicorns, but the reality is, the reason I call them accidental purple unicorns is because sometimes the manager doesn't realize that they're asking too much. Yeah. And so we have to be firm with them. We have to push back. Sometimes we just kind of listen to what they want. We just say, okay, we'll go get it. That's just not how it works. We have to be able to push back and really focus on 3 areas: the pay structure, which we've already talked about, the education piece, and the actual previous experience.
So from my perspective, one of the pitfalls that I see from hiring managers when they run into this accidental purple unicorn is they are thinking ahead of what they want this person to do in 18 months, 2 years, whatever.
Exactly.
And so, and they start describing that role, but their budget doesn't cover that. And so they end up describing a senior position when they only have budget for a junior position.
Yep.
Or
prime example.
Yeah, that's and so it's okay to want them to grow into that.
Yep.
But and then maybe the best way that I've seen people do is say, in the future you will be doing this, but you don't list it as an actual preference, so people can see. And what's interesting about that is you put that in your job description, it actually shows a career path for them for the next role, which
makes them more excited.
That's exactly right.
Guys, I can't tell you how important it is. You know how many applicants that we interview and meet with some of our clients where we've rewritten their ads for them, and the first thing they'll say in the interview is, oh my gosh, your ad stood out from all the rest. There was something about your ad that made all the difference. That's why I applied. If your applicants don't have this feeling of excitement, I mean, think about it. How many of you are dealing with more ghosting right now? I do this a lot in my ghosting presentations when I talk about this. The reason ghosting is so prevalent right now is because your ad is not exciting them in any way. So you are a forgettable company.
Yeah.
Your job is a forgettable job. You look like everybody else. And so as soon as it comes down to the point where we're reaching out and trying to get the interviews and things like that scheduled, even if it's just a phone screen, they're more likely to ghost you because there's nothing about what you're saying in your ad that tells them that, oh my gosh, I can't wait till these people call me, right? So yeah, I can't emphasize this enough. Make sure you really hone in on the hard qualifications, differentiate it from the preferences, and yeah, if it's a junior role, it's a junior role. That's okay because applicants love the fact that there's that mobility. That they can be trained and they can learn and grow. Talk about that in the job ad. If your manager is telling you, I want this senior person, but I'm willing to look at this, talk about this and the fact that they can move to that. Oh my gosh, that's going to get applicants excited more than anything.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. So let's talk about the hiring process. There's a rule of thumb, and this is way less than what people think it is. 2 rules of thumb. The candidate should never have to take more than 1 full day off, right? So like if they have to take time off of work, a half hour here is okay.
Most of them are employed,
right? Because that's what everyone wants.
Yep.
It's like, I want the passive candidate.
Yep.
If they're taking multiple days off, you failed. It's a full-on fail, right? And really what you're going for is about a half a day. Half day is ideal. It's 4 to 6 touch points, right? So when I say touch points, I mean, and I am talking about from the first phone screen to the final interview, right? Mm-hmm. So you want 1 to 2 options at the end for the final interview, and there's like no more. And I'm telling you, there is not an exception. Like, so don't think that you're special on this. If you can't figure it out in there, it's actually your problem. It's your problem because they're only on the market for 18 days.
Yep.
Now, so that's the thought process, right? Make sure you get through it fast, make sure it's efficient, because if you think about what your job ad is and all that, you've like spent all this time and effort and energy saying how cool your job is. Like, my company is super cool. We're doing all these things. And if you come in and you're disorganized and you're calling them 19 times, like to get through, like it's early in my career, I had, and it was before 2017. I had an interview process and I counted back into it. It was the most miserable experience I ever went through. I was 29 hours into it.
My God.
29 hours. They're like, hey, you're going to get the job. Come to my conference.
Yeah.
And so they had their own user conference. So I attended for 2 days. I got to the end of it. They lost some financing, and then they ghosted me on top of it. It was like the worst experience of my life. It was like so bad. It was classic bad, but it was terrible, right? That's like what not to do. Mm. Now I'm going to there is a switchover point. The minute you get to the negotiation process, that rule goes out the window. You contact them as many times as the candidate needs.
Yeah.
So if they need to talk 22 times because they're talking to their spouse, cool. If they need one time, cool too. It's but you let them drive. You give them as much answers as you need because they are one making the major life decision to switch over, right?
And it is a life decision.
That's exactly right. So
should be.
Yeah, that's right.
It should be a life decision.
That's right.
So
make sure that those are the 2 things and they are like at a total juxtaposition of what is, so it's short on this side and as long as they need on that side. Okay. Negotiation. This is where I've seen this messed up several times. Number 1, single point of contact, right?
Yeah.
So I like it. My personal preference is the hiring manager doesn't negotiate. And the reason why is sometimes they get into, where you get into some uncomfortable things where they're moving back and forth. And if you're not, and this is particularly true, I want salespeople in particular to listen to this because they negotiate all the time. Mm-hmm. You should not negotiate, actually, because what ends up happening is like you guys start to stake in on numbers, and like all of a sudden you're worried about getting a good deal rather than getting a good candidate across, right? At the end of the day, for most companies, they end up, when they get into that scenario, they become penny wise and pound foolish, and they start negotiating over, what ends up being $1,000. And the thing to remember, mostly speaking, $1,000 is huge for the candidate and not that big of a deal to a company.
So true.
And so, but they get into this position of where they want to win the negotiation, where that is like, great, you won.
That's not the point.
You won the negotiation, and you either get a candidate that comes in, accepts the job, and comes in demotivated, or they back off because they've gotten ticked off in the process. Yeah. So I like to have the recruiter run the negotiation, and if you have any weird feelings, that's okay because the recruiter's not going to work with them that much anymore. But the hiring manager can come in and you really have like almost a good cop, bad cop situation.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen work the absolute
and think
best.
about it. Think about the beginning. If you've already talked about this information ahead of time, that negotiation is so much easier to manage.
Mhm.
It is so much easier to have that open dialogue with everybody involved in the process when you've made this commitment up front that this is where we're going to be.
Yeah.
Right? I can't emphasize that enough.
You're exactly right. A good recruiter, but if they've done their job, they are re-emphasizing the number all along the way. So by the time they get to negotiation, it's like, here's the offer. There's no surprises. You know exactly what it is. Oh, by the way, here and they've seen the benefits. They know everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So
but it's old concept in sales. When I was a recruiter, it was under promise, over deliver.
Right. That's exactly right.
And so oftentimes in my negotiations, if all of a sudden in the offer I got you an extra grand, oh my gosh, that would go such a long way. So yeah, so critical here. All right, so let's talk about this just a little bit. The onboarding process is an area where we've seen a lot of additional ghosting in the last year and a half.
You're seeing it out of the candidates?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not only the candidates, I mean, employers too. It amazes me how many employers are getting to this stage of the process of negotiation with onboarding, and they are also ghosting the applicants. I don't know why that is.
Maybe it's because it goes back to what we talked about.
Yeah, they're going back and forth and they're arguing.
And they didn't. And the other thing is
they weren't prepared.
If they didn't understand the budgeting process up front and didn't get full approval up front, then it makes the companies look horrible.
It does.
And by the way, candidates, for those that are listening, that will follow you. Mm-hmm. So like we all just need to start acting a little bit better towards each other, because that experience that I talk about, like in my head,
still remember it.
I know who
you still talk about it on calls like this.
And they're like, and to be fair, he actually came back and apologized, but he was a curse word in our family's house for a long time, so it's fine.
Nice. So the first and foremost, as soon as you get to the onboarding phase, it amazes me how many organizations this onboarding phase is just discombobulated. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's still paper-based. Guys, think about it. If you've been so efficient from an electronic perspective up to this point, why is it that now that they actually have an offer on the table, we're bringing them in to be part of the team, and to become part of the team is this horrendous process? It amazes me. If your process today is not electronic, you will start losing this battle more and more.
Well, here's why we bring this up to the hiring managers. Influences, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's your job that's on the line. And that's the irony of it all, right? If you don't fill this role, you have a project that needs to be done. That project, it's on the line. So these are the things that, like, while they seem ancillary and off to the side, it absolutely matters to you.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely
if you are going through an onboarding, like, you need to get with your CFO, your finance team, or your HR group and say, hey, guys, we have to look buttoned up from start to end.
Yeah. And let me tell you something, the article, obviously, you probably read when you registered for this presentation, was a lot about the manager's journey. Mm-hmm. The onboarding process is as much about the manager's journey as it is about the applicant's journey. Because from an applicant perspective, you need them to go through this seamless process. But the manager also has to be involved, because now they're welcoming them to the team. They're reinforcing the fact that, hey, we said yes to you. We are so excited that you're here, and the manager has to be completely involved. Not to mention there's a few legal documents the manager has to look at and sign and all that fun stuff. So there are so many reasons why the candidate journey is continuing at this phase, as well as the manager's journey. You have to pay attention to both sides of that, because if you don't, and you only focus on one side or the other, that's where there's a huge disconnect at this stage of the process. Yeah. So you need to facilitate those introductions, have that long-term engagement at that point, and it will absolutely mitigate the ghosting. Yeah, it will absolutely mitigate. Now, we're going to spend maybe a minute on this. This is just this concept of, we can't just tell our managers to be engaging with the applicant. We have to teach them to actually be engaging, right? And so these are the focuses. Oftentimes we look too much at the traditional focus. We think everybody just wants a paycheck. They just want to report to the boss and be done and go home at the end of the day. We do these satisfaction surveys or annual reviews and things like that. We focus on their weaknesses and, hey, you need to do this better, and all those types of, it's just a job. People don't think that way. It's like you said, the candidate needs time, because they're literally making a career choice here. Yeah, right. Think about that for a moment. If this is actually a career choice, why are we not treating it that way? That is called an engaged focus. When we're truly engaged with our employees at this stage of the process, we are focusing on them, that this actually is their life, that we saw strengths in them that we knew were going to help our organization. We want to recognize those strengths. We want to be a coach to them, not just a boss that they report to. And there is purpose and development behind that. So here we go.
Yeah.
So guys, we have two options here. So obviously ApplicantPro has a lot of tools that you can access. If you go to applicantpro.com/tools, we have some tremendous free guides that actually highlight some of the things that we talked about today. And then scheduling a review call. If you click on this QR code, you want to talk about this. You want to have an option to actually discuss this information and discuss some of the challenges you're facing. You know, there are so many tools that are available out there. And obviously, you know, ApplicantPro and IsoTalent, we would love to be those tools. But at the end of the day, really, we just want you to be more successful. One of the things I've always loved about Robb, and I've only known him for a very short time, maybe about a year and a half, maybe. Mm-hmm. But him and I think alike on a lot of things. Just the whole recruiting process and the experience, and not just the managers, but the applicants across the entire spectrum. Because at the end of the day, there's a reason why you stay at the company that you're at. Because you love them too. Yeah, you like working with the people you work with. Right?
Think about that. Think about how much time you spend, like, you know, away from your family, away from your home life, right? At work. And so you need to be in an environment that you want to be at.
Yeah. So it's gotta be fun.
So what we want to do right now, if you have any questions that we want to open up, feel free to write them in the chat. If you're interested, if there's something you want us to touch on, feel free to shoot them out there. And we'd be happy to jump through it. One of the things that we may have jumped through, I want to talk, what are some of the things that maybe stick out to you that, you know, you'd like to touch on while we're waiting for people to pull up in the chat?
You know, probably one of the biggest things, I can't emphasize the agreement, guys. The agreement's like a goal. When you have your managers sign an agreement and agree to the timeline, it's like a written down goal. And we all know that when you actually write down a goal, you are much more likely to accomplish the goal.
Yeah, that's right.
And ultimately, when we're like if you're the hiring manager and I'm the recruiter, right, and we're having this conversation, by us signing an agreement together, we're now committed to one.
Right.
That is it's a much more powerful conversation, communication, and just working together than anything. I can't emphasize that enough. It was one of those things that always helped with my managers, because then I could go back and remind them, not in a demeaning way, but hey, this is what we agreed upon when we first initially started this journey, right? So what can we do to get back on page here and back to what we agreed to from the beginning, right? Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be moments where there's some modifications and changes here and there, but for the most part, when you write it down and you actually sign and agree to it, I can't tell you how powerful that is. It was one of the most powerful things that I could do when I was a recruiter.
One of the questions. So, question is, we get on what is the time the hiring manager's actual time commitment? So
it was such a good question.
So here's the thing to understand. And people like, I posted this online like 3 weeks ago.
I saw that. It was a good article. You guys gotta go see it.
People got beefy about it, right? Because they're like, no, that's not right. And I'm like, I know, I actually promised it's right. So I'm going to assume that your day job takes you 45 hours a week, right? Then that's, you know,
for a manager, that's probably typical.
It's probably typical, right? Give or take, depending on your role, right? If you want to recruit, if you have a recruiter helping you, right? So the recruiter's on the side doing it, and that to hire someone start to finish for a recruiter do it, it's 60 to 80 hours, man hours, right? To do it depending on the role, right? If it's like a technical position, it's probably closer to 100, 120, but man hours, okay? So you're talking about almost a month's worth of work, okay? The hiring manager's portion of that is actually, it is well into the 60-hour range, right? So you think about reviewing candidates, talking to the CFO, talking to finance to get things set up, the pre-interview, the post-interview. When you all add that up, it's about 60 hours of work on top of your day job. If it take the average time to fill right now, open role on, well, Indeed is a little bit different. I think Indeed, I saw an article a couple months ago, it was 93 days. They post open a role. And
they have some stats. Thank goodness they're coming out with some stats there, because they've been so hush hush about it for a long time. So on 93 days, it takes them, it gives them open role. Yet candidates are only on the market for 18 days. Yeah. So the thing to understand, the biggest advice I give for hiring managers is speed. Yeah.
Like, you have to reply to your whatever your part is, your commit, your time commit, you have to reply in sub 24 hours, right? So you got to go right away. And the reason why is if not, the candidate's going to move on to the next job because there's so many roles out there.
Yeah.
At the current unemployment rate, there are 2 job openings. This is the state of Utah, for example. I know this right off the top of my head. I just looked it up yesterday. There's 2 job openings for every job seeker.
Yeah.
2-to-1 ratio. It's crazy. Right?
Well, there's some states it's 3-to-1 right
Yeah,
now.
it's just,
I mean, yeah.
It's absolutely nutty. So the company that is the fastest wins, and the speed all boils down to recruiter is they obviously need to be fast, but it's actually more important that the hiring manager is fast on their side. They got to make it. They got to look. They got to do their part, and they got to make a decision quickly.
And how many of your managers know that timeline? Because again, that's the biggest disconnect. When your manager doesn't expect 60 hours or whatever that's going to look like, when they don't expect that, that's where the struggle is. So that's a great question, because you need to make sure that your managers are aware that this is the time commitment to fill this role, and that has been discussed before a job even gets put up on the job, period.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, everyone. I think those are the main questions for today. Steve, any parting wisdoms?
No, guys, I love hiring. I love this process. There's a reason why I have stuck with this industry for the past 20 years, because it can be fun and exciting, even in recessions. I mean, sure, they say there's a recession on the loom. This will be the 3rd one I've been through, and I'm okay with that because it's fun. It should be fun because we're building something, right? We're building an organization. We're building up people. We're building up the hiring managers that we work with. I can't emphasize enough how passionate.
Oh, it's super exciting. I'm with you. I had a candidate tell me that his mother said, "Oh, that's an answer to prayers," right? So like, I get super excited, I get super jazzed about that, right? You know?
But think about that for a moment. How many times is your job that you're offering an answer to someone's prayer?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not trying to make this religious or anything, but I'll tell you what. I am a man of faith, and I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of prayers answered, and there is nothing sweeter than knowing that that's the impact you're having.
Super fun.
Yeah,
super fun.
Absolutely.
Guys, thanks for your time. We'd love to chat with you about this. Come talk to us. Grab a ton of the QR code. You can reach out to me directly or Steve directly online on LinkedIn, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.